disabled people, LGBTs, and so on. So that was one of the big reforms since I last spoke. The other one, of course, was the enactment of same-sex marriage in 2013, which came into force the following year, 2014. Of course, it was a big advance, but it wasn't true equality because it was marriage through a separate legislation. So instead of just simply removing the penalties and restrictions governing the 1949 Marriage Act, the government introduced a whole new legal framework specifically and exclusively for LGBT plus people. And that is not, of course, true equality, because true equality would be equality for everyone under the 1949 Marriage Act. There are also other issues around the trans spousal veto and the fact that the Church of England, even if it wishes to, is prohibited by law from enacting same-sex marriages in its places of worship. But overall, of course, that was a big advance. There's also been other developments with the disregard and pardon scheme for gay and bisexual men who were convicted under historic anti-gay laws. But again, it's two steps forward, one step back, because most of the men, in fact, about 2/3 of all the men who've applied for a disregard of pardon have been refused. And that clearly shows that what was intended is not working. And all efforts to get this remedied still have come to nothing. So, there are people in Parliament like Lord Cashman who are trying to push to change things, but particularly with Brexit and now with the coronavirus crisis, the wheels of government are just not addressing these issues. But hopefully they will in the future. Talking of the future, I'd just like to briefly look at some of the issues that we still face. So, of course, one of them is the government's failure to honour its promise to outlaw gay conversion therapies. These are harmful, damaging, quack therapies that do not work. The government promised 2 years ago that they would be outlawed. They're still not outlawed today, and the government is saying it needs to look further at the issue. Well, the issue is very, very clear. People are posing as being able to cure people's sexuality when that is not backed by any scientific, medical, or psychological research. The government also promised to reform the Gender Recognition Act, to remove the obstacles and hurdles that trans people face to affirm their true gender identity in legal documents. That also has not happened. Going back to the issue of gay and bisexual men who were convicted under historic anti-gay laws, Germany has already initiated a compensation scheme, not only for men who were convicted under homophobic legislation, but even for men who were investigated and interrogated, including when there are actually no charges eventually pursued. The German government says that both of these instances, interrogation, investigation, and actual prosecution and conviction, merit compensation. My own foundation, the Peter Tatchell Foundation, 2 years ago, wrote to and delivered a petition to number 10 Downing Street, urging the then Prime Minister, Theresa May, to institute a compensation scheme. We argued that many of these men had been fined, some had been jailed, some lost their jobs as a consequence of a conviction for a homosexual offence. Those who are married often had their marriages break up and were denied subsequently access or had restricted access to their own children. Some were victimised and brutalised by homophobic mobs in the street. And of course, the long-term emotional and psychological effect is that many of them suffered for many years of extreme anxiety, depression, perhaps sometimes turning to drugs and alcohol, in some cases having mental breakdowns and even attempting or committing suicide. Now, there are about an estimated 15,000 men still alive today who were convicted under these historic anti-gay laws. And we should never forget that the criminalisation of homosexuality in England and Wales only fully and finally ended in 2003. In Northern Ireland, the last element of criminalisation for sex between men was only confirmed in 2009. And in Scotland, that complete end to criminalisation only happened in 2013. So there are a lot of men who are victims of these laws, and we believe they deserve compensation for the suffering they endured. Another big issue, of course, is the battle for LGBT plus inclusive relationship and sex education in schools. Right now, the government is sending mixed signals. It's saying on the one hand, yes, LGBT issues and people, lifestyles, relationships should be included in relationship and sex education in schools. But when it comes to the protest by some parents outside some schools, the government's saying the voices of parents must be listened to. In my view, there can be no parental veto over ensuring that LGBT plus people who are part of our society are included in these lessons in order to promote understanding and acceptance. Not, of course, to promote homosexuality, but to tackle prejudice and bullying, which currently exists in many, many of our schools. In fact, the latest research shows that nearly half of all LGBT plus pupils in our schools have been victims of bullying on account of their sexual orientation or gender identity. As you know, the government put back from September last year to September this year the legal requirement for schools to introduce the new expanded relationship and sex education. But even to this day, we don't know the details. And indeed, the guidelines that have been sent to schools are very vague. You know, there are certain things they must do, but it's not entirely clear. And this is an issue not just for LGBT plus pupils, but for straight pupils and cisgender pupils as well. What the education requirement will actually be is still not spelled out. And recent pronouncements by government ministers indicate that we fear there may be backtracking on that too. So we need to keep up the pressure and, of course, support those schools like the ones in Birmingham, but many other places as well, who are in the front line of trying to provide LGBT plus pupils and their families with support in order to ensure that they are not bullied and in order to ensure that heterosexual and cisgender kids also have an understanding and a sympathy and empathy, a solidarity with members of our community in schools. Another issue is the blood donation restrictions. You know, we started off with a lifetime ban on gay and bisexual men donating blood. Then after a huge long campaign, it was reduced to 12 months deferral period, then recently to the 3-month deferral period. So under that system, gay or bisexual men who've had sex in the preceding 3 months cannot donate blood. But this is a continuation of the same stereotypical generalization about gay and bisexual behavior. Of course, there are some gay and bisexual men whose sexual behavior puts them at risk of HIV and other sexual infections. But there are many who are not in that category. And so what my foundation has been arguing for the last few years is that there should be a switch from blanket discrimination against gay and bisexual men with this 3-month deferral period for everyone to an individual risk assessment, so that more questions are asked about the sexual behavior of the individual who wishes to donate blood. And this should apply to straight blood donors as well, because many of them engage in risky behavior and could be carrying HIV or other sexual infections. Now, the blood transfusion service has said that they accept in principle that personal individual risk assessment is the way to go. But they claim it can't happen for a few years. But they've given no reason, no explanation. So again, we are pushing for this change in policy, which would not only safeguard patients better, because at-risk heterosexual people are not being given the same scrutiny, but also, of course, would ensure an increase in the blood supply for patients who need it. Recently, with the coronavirus crisis, this issue has become even more topical because, as many of you will know, gay and bisexual men who've had COVID-19 and volunteered to participate in the blood plasma trials researching treatments for the COVID-19 have been refused purely and simply on account of their sexual orientation, even though they are in long-term monogamous relationships, practicing safer sex, and have tested negative for HIV and other sexual infections. It is still the same old blanket discrimination based on outdated, inaccurate stereotypes about gay male behavior. Then we have the issue, of course, that the Equality Act, which I mentioned as being so progressive, passed back in 2010, it is a great advance, but written into it, and indeed into all other equality laws that exist, are still limited qualified exemptions for religious organizations, not just places of worship, but also faith-run schools, hospitals, nursing homes, homeless shelters, and so on. They are allowed by law to discriminate against LGBT plus people if they can demonstrate that it's necessary to preserve their, quote, religious ethos. Now, no other institution has exemptions from the equality laws. My view is that religious bodies should be required to comply to equality statutes when they provide a public service in the same way as everyone else. And so far, all attempts to get this change made have fallen on deaf ears in government. They seem to be pandering to and colluding with religious homophobes. Another issue we face, of course, is the need to ensure that there's a better deal for LGBT plus asylum seekers. Compared to people seeking asylum based on religion or belief, ethnicity, or political beliefs or activism, LGBT plus refugees have a much tougher time. The refusal rate is much, much higher. And we see time and time again LGBT plus refugees who fled persecution in countries like Iran or Uganda coming to Britain to seek asylum and being put in an asylum detention center, which is in effect a glorified prison by another name. Now, they've not done nothing wrong, yet they're being treated like common criminals. In that asylum detention center, they have limited freedoms and rights. They don't have the freedom and capacity to gather evidence to support their asylum claim. They have very restricted access to solicitors. They are often bullied and abused by fellow refugees who often come from similar or the same homophobic countries. It is very, very tough. There is, in my view, no justification for any refugee to be placed in an asylum detention center unless they have a record of serious, violent and sexual offenses. Beyond that, refugees should not be detained. And moreover, they should be allowed to work, because currently, under the rules, anybody applying for asylum is forbidden from working and is forced to live in destitution on a state handout of about £35 a week. No one can live on that money. No one can. It's absolutely shameful that these people who have often suffered terribly are forced to live in this destitution, especially when many of them have the skills that we need. So I've been dealing with LGBT plus and other refugees who are doctors, plumbers, teachers, engineers. They have skills that contribute to our economy, yet they are being forced to live in destitution. We pay them £35 a week to live on, a miserly, mean-spirited sum, when they could be working, paying tax, paying national insurance, contributing not only to the economy, but to the exchequer as well. It is the ban on people who are refugees from working is an absolute outrageous scandal. And I'm very strongly, my foundation is very strongly supporting the Lift the Ban campaign as part of our work to try and get a better deal, not just for LGBT plus refugees, but for all refugees. So that's an overview. But I want to finish on a happy note. You know, until 1999, Britain had by volume the largest number of anti-gay laws of any country in the world, some of them dating back centuries. Yeah, I mentioned that, you know, the law against gross indecency, which sent Oscar Wilde to prison in 1895 and resulted in Alan Turing being forced to undergo chemical castration in 1952. That law, which was passed in 1885, was only finally repealed in England and Wales in 2003. But hey, it was repealed. It is history. But having said that, you know, we had in 1999 the largest volume of anti-gay laws of any country in the world. Today, we have some of the best. Although the recent ILGA report shows that Britain has slipped down the league table. I think we're number nine in the world now when it comes to LGBT plus rights. A few years ago, we were number 1. And that is partly because of some of the issues I've just discussed, some of the shortcomings that still remain to be remedied. So good news, bad news, but overall, we have moved mountains. And I want to pay tribute to every LGBT plus person, most of them unknown and unsung, who've made that possible. You are heroes. And I also want to thank our straight friends and allies, because without them, we would not have made this progress. So I think on this 10th anniversary of GPN, we have a lot to celebrate. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you want to, anyone would like to ask questions or, you know, challenge anything I've said or give your point of view, you're welcome to. We've got a few minutes.
I have a question. Hi, Peter, and thank you so much for sharing like everything you've done so far. I was just wondering, just a general question, why is it that, for example, with the repealing of all the conviction of gay men, why does it take such a long time? Not just in this country. I grew up in Germany. It takes like whatever 50 odd years or something like that often for things like that to be overturned, and most of those people are probably dead by now. So what is it? Why does it always take such a long time to kind of like repeal those things?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if we take from say 1885 until the Scottish repeal fully came into force in 2013, the estimate is that about 100,000 men were convicted under historic anti-gay laws, 100,000. And of those, an estimated 15,000 are still alive. Now, I think the fact that it's been so long in getting progress is indicative of the depth of homophobia in our society. And one of the indicators, of course, is that among many people, including up until the 50th anniversary of the 1967 Act in 2017, many people, including MPs, journalists and others, were under the assumption that homosexuality was made legal in 1967, when it was in fact a very partial, limited decriminalization. And in the few years afterwards, in fact, the police repression intensified, and the number of gay and bisexual men convicted for consenting behavior actually increased by 400% by 1974, just a few years later. So there is this misapprehension about our history and our circumstance. I'm sure all of you have heard it, recently, what are you complaining about? You've got your rights, it's all over. well, as I explained just now, there are still issues that are unresolved. And I guess it is down to perhaps not a barefaced vicious homophobia, but just a homophobia of ignorance and a lack of awareness and sensitivity about LGBT plus issues and what we still face.
Very good. Any other question?
Peter, may I ask some? Oh, sorry, you want to go first, Beatrice?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation, Peter. I have two questions. Basically, I was trained as a French lawyer, and I've done a lot of asylum work, and I've requalified here. And I wanted to ask you, at the moment, I mean, do you expect any changes with the Brexit coming up? You know, any sort of things that are going to be worse or improve in the UK? And secondly, are you looking for volunteers? Because I would be really pleased, to offer you some help in connection with the asylum seekers things, because that's what I've been doing all my life. So are you autonomous, or do you recruit at the moment some volunteering help and, in connection, for example, with French speakers or whatever, something where people could be helpful? I don't know. Do you have any needs at the moment?
At the moment, we don't have any French language issues. My assistant, Denise Tukamani, is a fluent French speaker.
Oh, yes.
And he is able to deal with that, and he is very attuned with asylum law, and he does our main casework. And I want to thank him very much. So thank you for your kind offer. With regard to Brexit, I mean, I think the answer is we don't know, but it looks ominous. I would say that things are going to get harsher and harsher towards foreign nationals in this country, both in terms of immigration, migrant workers, refugees and asylum seekers. Shockingly, the British government has just announced that even EU citizens who have settled status granted by the Home Office in this country will not now automatically get UK citizenship. And it has introduced this bizarre rule that they must prove that they had insurance during the period they've been in this country, when that was never a requirement when they initially came here. It's only just been announced now. Well, how can someone be expected to have insurance, health insurance, when that was never a requirement? I mean, they're just being told they need to have it now. I mean, it's absolutely appalling that a government would do this to people it's granted settled status to. So I am very pessimistic. But I'm extremely gratified that Boris Johnson's poll ratings have dropped by 20% in the last week. I think his mishandling of the Dominic Cummings issue is going to do his government great damage. But of course, we don't have a democracy in Britain. You know, we are not a true democracy. We have a prime minister who has 100% of the power based on 44% of the votes cast in December 2019. That is not democracy. You know, you cannot have a government with 44% of public support wielding 100% of the power. But that's what we have under Britain's ridiculous, antiquated, and frankly oppressive first past the post system. I think it is absolutely crucial that we reform the voting system to ensure that we have a representative government, and then we can start talking about, seriously changing things.
Thank you, Peter. Rex, you wanted to ask a question?
Does Peter have another few minutes to stay with us?
Yes, okay, yeah. But if I'm getting a call, if I get a call, I have to take it. And
Peter, as you may remember, I'm a sexual health physician. I was interested in your description of the latest requirements to allow someone to donate blood, and you mentioned 3 months. Is that if it's an MSM who claims not to have had any sexual contact or no penetrative sex in the last 3 months, or where does 3 months come into this?
Well, the general rule is a man who's had sex with another man in the preceding months cannot donate blood or plasma. Interestingly, the organ donation system is different.
Okay.
Organ donation bodies don't have the same stipulation. They have mostly moved to individual assessment. When you drill down, you know, the restriction is actually for men who've had oral or anal sex. But even with a condom, and even if they test HIV negative, they are banned. So the actual technical detail is, if you're a man who's had oral or anal sex with another man in the preceding 3 months, even with a condom, which hasn't broken, and even if you test HIV negative, you are not allowed to donate blood.
Interesting. So the questionnaire which the individual potential donor is given or asked, they specify oral and anal, or did they say, have you had sex? Because people would say heavy kissing is sex, which it is.
I think it's oral and anal. I haven't actually looked at the latest wording for about 3 or 4 months myself, so
Okay.
it may have changed. But people generally say, if you had any kind of sex with another man in the preceding 3 months, you're banned. But when I last looked, that wasn't the case. Unless it's been modified in the last few months. It was specifically oral or anal sex, but it does specify even if you have a condom which has not broken, and even if you have last tested HIV negative, you're banned.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Peter Scott-Presland would like to ask a question.
Very, very quickly, Peter. I just wanted to raise the issue of pride with you. You've been very critical of the commercialization of pride, but it seems to me that this year we've actually got the opportunity, if we take it in a careful way, to reclaim something of pride in its anarchic spirit. And I'm personally planning on assembling at Hyde Park at 1 o'clock on Saturday, the 27th of June, with my rainbow-coloured mask and a little placard saying "You can't lock down pride." I just wondered if you had anything planned of that nature.
I do indeed, but I'm planning to do the same route as 1972, which would start in Trafalgar Square and go to Hyde Park. But I'm open to the idea that we might do it the other way.
I could always walk backwards, don't worry. Excellent.
But obviously it will be with social distancing and face masks.
Absolutely. But there are also issues about how we communicate with each other about all these things, and without actually inviting some kind of closure from police.
No,
well.
I will be working on this in about a week's time when I'm through the uphill mountain of things I've got to do next week. I'll get down to that. Yeah.
Count me in then. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
There are 2 people raising their hands there. Gary would like to ask a quick question, perhaps?
Thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you so much for your work. You're a real hero of mine. I was curious, how do you actually, with all the things that you have to deal with, or that you're trying to invoke change, how do you prioritize, and what kind of resource do you have in terms of just in addition to yourself, who else is working for your foundation?
Well, as a general rule, I try to work on issues that perhaps others are not working on, or issues that are marginalized and less well known. So you might be able to see in the background on the pinboard there, a free Justice for Jeremy, which has nothing to do with LGBT. It's about the case of Jeremy Bamber, who was convicted in 1985 for killing 5 members of his family. Hardly anybody knows about it or cares about it. Everybody says he was a mass murderer, throw away the key. But I and others have discovered that the police suppressed massive evidence during the trial, and there is certainly a doubt about his conviction. I'm not saying he's innocent, but there's certainly a reasonable doubt that he's guilty. So I'm pressing for a new trial. So that's an example of the left field marginal issues that I sometimes take up. And likewise with, LGBT plus stuff. I mean, I can remember way back in 1992, I think it was, the LGBT rights group Outrage was the first to speak out against the lifetime ban on gay and bisexual men donating blood, saying this was not medically and scientifically founded. We were actually denounced by Gay Men Fighting AIDS and the Terence Higgins Trust, who supported the official line that this ban was necessary to protect the blood supply. Now, eventually, many, many years later, like about nearly 20 years later, they came around and supported reform. But, you know, there's an example of where we were sort of outliers, you know, left field campaigners taking up issues that no one else would. And so it is with the blood restrictions, you know, now that we've championed the cause, or I've championed the cause, my foundation has championed the cause of individual risk assessment for many, many, many years. And it's only just in the last year or so that some or other organizations are beginning to at least say it should be considered. So that's how I go about it. My foundation is really tiny. There's me, my assistant, Planista Kamani, and we've got about 4 volunteers who give up maybe half a day or a day a week. So we're very, very, very tiny. If you're interested, I'd say that please go to the website, petertatchellfoundation.org. In the top right-hand corner, there's a little button called Join Us. If you click on that, you can put in your email address and we will subscribe you to receive our weekly PTF newsletter, which gives a summary of about 6 or 7 key human rights issues in that week. Many of which you've probably not seen. Some of you may have seen some of them. We try and pick out issues that are really strong and maybe sometimes less well known. And that's entirely free. If you subscribe, it doesn't cost you anything. Just sign up and we'll send you those bulletins. The other thing is next to the Join Us button is the Donate button. And if you feel able to, I know perhaps you're hard pressed in these difficult times, but if you are able to, maybe consider donating, you know, £3 or £4 or £5 a month. That would really help us because we depend entirely on donations from volunteers to carry on our work. We don't get any government funding. We don't have any big charitable foundations. We're a bit too on the edge and, you know, pushing at the envelope for most of those donors to accept us. So maybe if you can't afford to make a donation, you know, ask some of your friends, send them the details and ask them. And likewise with joining us, please sign up, but also get your friends too. And that's the way you become part of our little human rights community.
And you're not really looking for volunteers, I guess, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, simple things that anybody can do, like stuffing envelopes and so on. We don't do that. We've moved digital and online and paperless a long time ago. And like with the casework that we do around asylum, hate crime, discrimination, and so on, most of this requires quite a specialist knowledge. So it's not something someone can just walk in and pick up. So we have a couple of volunteers who we have trained in limited capacities to do certain things, but it's quite a big task. You know, we would love to take on more volunteers, but there's also the issue, who's going to manage them? I mean, Pliny and I are going flat out as it is. We don't have any wriggle room, any space to really spend time on training much as we'd like. And of course, you know, we don't expect volunteers to stay forever, and many of them only stay for like, you know, a few weeks or so on. By the time you do all that training, it's probably not worth it. But yeah, we appreciate the offer, and we'd like eventually to be able to get to a financial situation where we can employ more people, so we could have a volunteer coordinator who would do that kind of work.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. There was another raised hand. Daniel Butt would like to ask a quick question, perhaps the very last question, perhaps, because I think that no, Peter has.
Yeah, I need to go after this one.
Yes. Daniel, we need to put your microphone on.
Okay. Peter, I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of our community. It's you know, wonderful to have someone who's so articulate, you know, and so committed and so passionate. How do you sort of maintain your passion after all these years? How do you stay so committed?
Well, first let me say it's very kind and generous of you to compliment me in that way, but I am only one of many. You know, there are tens of thousands of mostly unsung, unknown LGBT campaigners around the country and around the world who are doing amazing, extraordinary things. And I think it's our cumulative collective effort that makes the change. You know, I wouldn't say that I've done this, that, or the other. I've been one of a number of people who have helped make some changes. What sustains me, I suppose, is partly success. I mean, you know, I can look back over the 53 years of campaigning I've been doing and can see so many examples where me, together with others, have actually made a tangible difference. We have won reforms, we've got changes, we've helped make them happen. And that's a great motivator when you can see that your effort does have a result. That really keeps you going. Also, I think that the feedback from people is, you know, helps me a lot, because, you know, it's great to receive an email like I did a few weeks ago from a young guy who said, oh, you came to my school in 2009. I was so inspired by you. I decided to work in human rights. I'm now working for Amnesty International. Thank you so much. I think, wow, the fact that, you know, my few words at the school all those years ago, 11 years ago, actually got this guy into human rights work. That's amazing. I think of the examples of, this was quite a few years ago, a lesbian couple who finally got married, and they said, you know, we thought we'd never see this day. You know, we know that both our parents, if one of us died, they would seize our joint property. They would exclude the other from the funeral, from the burial. Thanks to you, we've now got legal security. So it's little things like that that are, you know, moving personal stories that also help sustain me. Plus, of course, I've been through a rough time in many ways. I've had, you know, hundreds of violent attacks upon my person and my flat. I've had, you know, 3 arson attempts on the place where I live, a bullet through the front door, dozens of bricks and bottles and iron bars through my windows. I've been beaten up in the street well over 300 times. You know, all the teeth in my mouth have been chipped and cracked in those assaults and had to be reconstructed. You know, I've got brain injuries and eye injuries from the bashings by Mugabe's thugs and by neo-Nazis in Moscow. But I think to myself, well, that's terrible. I never wanted this. But by comparison to human rights defenders in Russia or Iran or Saudi Arabia or Uganda or wherever, I'm lucky. You know, I haven't been, you know, suffered really, you know, totally life-changing injuries. I, you know, haven't been imprisoned or tortured. I haven't been executed. So I count myself lucky. And as I say, you know, when I think about all the amazing changes that I've helped contribute towards, I think, you know, no money could buy that, and nothing could be better for me, for my soul, my feelings, my emotions, my well-being, than to know that I've been part of this great historic movement. And I intend to carry on for another 30 years. I think I shall, I think about 100 will be a good time to, 100 years old will be a good time or so to hang up the campaigning shoes.
And you might be eventually knighted by then, of course.
I was going to say, you're going to walk up your backyard back and forth, and then you're going to collect, what was it, like £50 million for the LGBT movement?
Well, that's a good thing we're thinking of. I mean, I have been offered a knighthood and a peerage, allegedly, but I've said no, because I don't really believe in the honour system. It's deeply corrupt, and, you know, most of the people who get the big honours are, you know, time-serving yes men and women. You know, heads of big corporations. You know, I think that young, you know, people who do make personal sacrifices should get some form of honour, but people who have just been in the civil service for 30 years or have, you know, headed up some big corporation, I don't think they should be getting honours at all.
True. Well, it's amazing. Thank you so much, Peter. It's really, truly, you're truly inspiration really to all of us. And so thank you very much for your work. And because we all benefit from it, it's true. So thank you again so much, really, from the bottom of our hearts, really. And
thank you.
know that you have to go really soon because you've got an interview soon with the, was it the Guardian or something?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, is it right?
I'll just tell you, it's some of you may know that in the late 1990s, I tracked down and exposed a Nazi war criminal who'd escaped justice. SS Dr. Karl Wernet had conducted gruesome medical experiments on gay prisoners in Buchenwald and Neuengamme concentration camps, and he got away with it. He was allowed to escape to Argentina. But I did a big expose. Now, what's happened just in the last few days is that Argentina is proposing to put on its 5,000 lira banknote Ramon Carrillo, who was the then health minister in the post-war Argentinian government. And this man protected and aided Karl Wernet in Argentina, and actually allegedly funded him to continue further work on the elimination of homosexuality, which he'd originally been authorized to do by Heinrich Himmler, the head of the Gestapo. This health minister is an alleged Nazi sympathizer, an anti-Semite who's justified concentration camps, and Joseph Mengele. It's absolutely outrageous that a democratic Argentinian government would do this. So I'm trying to now work with the Guardian to expose that.
Good. Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, I must go. So thank you all once again. Happy anniversary to GPN.
Thank you.
May you have many, many more, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was very good. Right. So, gosh, yes, that was inspiring, certainly. Now, I told really everybody that I had really the possibility of putting everybody into breakout rooms if you wanted to speak with individual, like we do in a normal situations, really of that. And I can open them, and I think you can join one or the other. And I think we're only about 14, 16. I can open about 6 rooms or something. You can assign I don't know if you can assign yourself. No, I can't assign yourself. I'm going to assign people 2 on 2. Is it okay?
Jean-Francois, I have to go, I'm afraid, but I just wanted to say thank you so much, and congratulations again on the 10 years.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. It's wonderful.
Jean-Francois, I need to go as well, but thank you for today. It was wonderful and really amazing, really inspirational speaker. So well done. That was great to get Peter
it's very good.
along. I was very, very moved by what he said, and especially I had no idea that he'd been attacked personally so many times. I mean, that was really shocking. So.
The very first day that he came, the first talk that he gave us on GPN 10 years ago, he was actually, there were some people in Soho that actually ran after him because they recognized him. They wanted to beat him up. But the first time I thought really, is that something that he tells every time? But it's true that every time that I've seen him really like that in Soho, he has to really look after himself, because there are some lot of very nasty people around. And because he's disturbing a lot of people, he's actually, yes, he's rattled the cage of a lot of people. And that is true, that he has seen it before, really. He just needs really, I mean, if he could afford actually have a bodyguard, I think he should have one as well. Because frankly, the thing that happened to him in Russia, I mean, we were totally puzzled when he heard that. I mean, I've seen him going to Russia, and then really suddenly he said, oh my God, been beaten again. And it is happening on a regular basis. I mean, when he tried to arrest really Mugabe as well, I mean, his bodyguards really just put him to the floor, and there was really, again, huge violence against him. But he's not frightened. He just goes for it, but it is amazing. He's an amazing person, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm glad we've been able to support him in little ways. Yes.
Congratulations on your 10 years.
Thank you very much indeed, Daniel. I appreciate that, and thank you for coming. Really.
Yeah, take care. Have a lovely afternoon, all.
Thank you, Jeremy. You too. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
If the discussion groups you're going to create, they'll be on which subject?
Oh, actually, we do whichever subject you want to do, but now we actually really sort of smaller. There's still another 10. There's still other people who actually don't have actually the camera on. So,
I have to go myself. I'm sorry, but thank you so much for hosting this. It's wonderful. I just wanted to say I was really surprised. I just Googled and found out, you might have said this in the beginning, that he was 68. I had misunderstood. I thought that he was 54 himself. He looks amazing. It's incredible. Like,
yes,
I guess having that satisfaction of all that he's accomplished, as he said, it was really interesting to hear what motivates him and what makes him tick. But he looks fantastic, I think. So anyway, I wanted to thank you so much. It was just a really wonderful experience.
Thank you very much, Gary. Really, really enjoyed really meeting you today, and see you again very soon, hopefully.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Jean-Francois, since there's so few of us, why don't we just have one group for the discussion?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
don't really need
Keep one group.
You're right. I'm going to close these things because we don't really need it now anymore. But it is very good. It's really inspiring, really, to hear about that, really about what happened to things. I mean, the subject of the presentation, you know, we've got for the members, we've got actually a discussion on Friday, and I think the discussion would be actually how has the pandemic affected your business? That's another
Pandemic.
Yeah, because a lot of people really at the moment, I don't know, I mean, I haven't been out at all since the 12th of March myself. And I don't know how it affects you as well. I mean, I don't know. I mean, for me, that's okay. I'm all right, even though I received a letter telling me that I had COVID-19. But anyway, don't know how it happened. But anyway, there you go. I mean, my partner has to go to work because sadly he's well, it doesn't have to now because we are both confined, and it still works really for the governments here. But there you go.
I have to go too.
Okay, Dimitris, it's lovely to see you. And
Yes.
thank you very much for joining us from Verviers. It's lovely to see you. And see you again very soon, hopefully. See you maybe on Friday, perhaps.
Yes, maybe.
Bye.
Thank you, Dimitris. Bye-bye.
Actually, Jean-Francois, so the Friday session, is that, what's the structure of that? Is that more informal chats or separate breakout rooms?
It's very informal chat. Sometimes sometimes it happened we were 2 or 3, sometimes we were about 10. It depends really how it is and who comes to it, really, quite frankly. So it doesn't really matter so much really what we talk about, but I thought really about today. I sent to all the members really a letter, an email saying really on Friday, that's what we're going to discuss, how that affects you really, because at the moment we all been living through it for a good nearly 3 months now. So yeah, what are we? 12th March?
Fine. Okay, good. All right, well, I'm going to sign off now as well, and may see you on Friday.
Okay, it's good.
Thank you very much for organising. It was great. It's very insightful.
Thank you very much indeed, Gary. It's lovely to see you again. See you again soon. See you on Friday, perhaps.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Dave, I thought Peter might have said something about his project of the queer century before he left, but perhaps he's let it be known to some of your members about his project, his coming opera project, the one which you tune in on Tuesday evening.
Queer century? Oh.
Yes, I think you, did you view one of the plays last week?
Peter, yes, Peter, he's left us, is he?
Yes, Peter has left us, I think.
Okay, he must have left, yes, okay. Actually, yes, including the people who had the cameras off.
The interesting thing to let other members know about it, but with Peter's, but I think Peter has enough facilities for some more viewers.
Well, perhaps so, yes, absolutely. It was very good. I really enjoyed it, actually. That was a play. Actually, you might be interested to go and see that. Have you got actually Peter Scott Presland's email, Adam?
Well, I think you can probably reach him on is it the queercentury.org.co.uk, or it would be homopromos.co.uk, and you just ask for a link to the Zoom meetings, which are 2 of them each Tuesday night, and there are play readings about prominent members in gay and lesbian LGBT history from 1900 through to now. And there are 2 plays each night which will be made into operas. So we're reading opera scripts, but what you'll be seeing on Tuesdays is not the musical version, but the spoken version. And there's a mixture of comedy and drama and politics and activism.
Very good. Oh, still recording.